We are here with the next chapter of Sardo. The chapter's name is The J. Steve Valley Book Oven. So basically, what happened in the last chapter was that our protagonist got an offer from Chef Kate to bake 6 loaves of bread for her. But the problem here is that her current oven can only bake two. So let's see what is the solution that she finds to this problem. The challenge from Chef Kate smoldered in my brain. It was a familiar burn. I broke down the tolerances, the timings, to produce bread in the quantity she required. I would either have to start at 3 in the morning and bake loaves two at a time for 4 hours, or I would have to acquire a bigger oven. Midway through the soul of a sourdough, in a side seat, Everett Broom alluded to the deep satisfaction of building a brick oven of one's own. A full exploration of the design considerations is beyond the scope of this book, he wrote. But you'll find a helpful community online at Global Gluten. Global Gluten turned out to be a collection of forums populated by a kind of person who I had known existed. The carbohydrate nerd. They talked about hydration ratios, pH levels, dough temperatures. They traded recipes and swapped starters. And as Broom had promised, they gathered in a sub-forum devoted to the design and construction of elaborate wood-fired brick ovens. Here, the carb nerds shared blueprints. The ovens they built were beautiful architecture like miniature Byzantine churches. For each design, there was a corresponding heat curve that swelled to 800 degrees or more, then eased down slowly for hours. The carb nerds got very, very excited about the shapes of these curves. There were a few message threads pinned to the top of the forum, perennial references. One of them had been created 6 years ago and boasted 79 pages of commentary. Its title was the Steve J. Steve $2,200 value oven, version 6. I investigated. There were pictures captured in a backyard and presumably belonged to J. Steve. The grass was brown and patchy. There was a chain link fence and a plastic dog dish, and there was an oven, neither Byzantine nor beautiful. Instead, it was fully Mad Max, a squarish jumble of brick and metal. I had stumbled across the picture in a different context. I would have assumed I was looking at the remains of a very small shanty following a great conflagration. The lines were askew. The metal was rusted. The bricks around the door were stained black with char. Following J. Steve's initial post, his profile picture was the affable snout of a golden retriever, where were the 79 pages of comments in which the carb nerds proposed tweaks of all kinds, different dimensions, different materials, but at some point all conceded this was a badass little oven. I could acquire all the materials at the Expedient big box home supply store. Unfortunately, my car was minuscule and its tiny engine moaned even when it was carrying just me and zero home supplies over San Francisco's hills. I knocked on my upstairs neighbor's door, and when Cornelia appeared, I asked her if I could borrow her car. Nobody drives it but me, she said. You need to go somewhere? I'll drive you. What day is it? Yeah, I should get out. Cornelia's car was her defining feature. I saw it approximately 100 times more often than I saw her. A battered green Honda CR-V that was always parked directly in front of the house, except when Cornelia was working, and which replaced it with when she replaced it with four traffic cones as I watched. She removed them from the trunk and plunked them down. The car's windshield was bordered with the badges and shields of every extant of on demand delivery service, along with several that were now defunct. While she navigated us to the expedient big box supply store just south of the city, she swiped through a long carousel of apps with one hand, and I sensed 90% of her attention now. She murmured, nah, nah, nah. Cornelia was a highly strategic pawn in the on demand delivery marketplace. Most hours of the day she lounged at her home in her sweatpants, but she was at all times monitoring the apps, and at that moment when demand burned blue hot Friday nights, often but also random Tuesdays when the fog was at its thickest, suggesting to people that they ought to stay home and ponder their lives over delivered Burmese food. Cornelia would spring into action and earn $1,000 in a tire screeching rally worthy of Bullet. When it rained, she paid her rent in a day. At the expedient big box supply store, I wound my way through the towering aisles, following the shopping list provided by JST. I amassed 36 cinder blocks, 236 plain red bricks, not fire bricks, which JST claimed were for luxury ovens only, one bag each of clay and sand, one 2 by 4 cut to measure, and a supply of kindling, which the store sold in neat boxes. When I returned to the car with three polo shirted helpers pushing three different carts laden with materials, the trunk of Cornelia's CRV was already open and she was perched on the bumper, swiping through her phone, wearing a satisfied cat like look. While I had shopped, she had completed 2 delivery missions, earning $50. She ferried me and my materials back to Cabrillo Street, the CRV riding noticeably lower to the ground, and there we hauled my acquisitions one by one around the side of the building into a heap in the backyard. What are you doing out here? Cornelia huffed at last. I told her with as much confidence as I could muster that I was constructing a wood-fired brick oven in our backyard. How crafty! She retreated to the front of our building. I considered its bulk. It was charmless, a blank expanse of stubbly pseudo stucco broken just by two windows, mine at the eye level, Cornelia's above. The appropriate next step in this project would have been to contact the property management company, explain what I wanted to do, perhaps offer to increase my security deposit by some as yet known amount, and hope for official assent. It was early evening. The sky was a low ceiling of fog. I shooed away the Cabrillo Street cats. I beat back the weeds. I built the oven. It was shockingly easy because the instructions had been refined by Global Gluten's collective cleverness into something approaching IKEA grade ease, and also because it was just a box for fire. I stacked the cinder blocks to mid-thigh, forming the oven's base. Then I assembled its floor and walls and ceiling, 3 bricks thick all around, leaving a gap a few bricks wide for the door. Finally, I mixed the clay and sand with water to make a mortar that I slathered into the cracks between bricks. I did this with my bare hands, as J. Steve recommended. Whatever mortar remained, I painted onto the oven's top and sides. The bricks were the crux of it, J. Steve explained. Prior to this just in time education, I had assumed that in wood fired brick oven, the flames of the fire backed the bread. I mean, of course, right? Wrong. Baking in its own oven would be a two-step process, and the first was for the fire to charge those thick walls with heat. The thicker the walls, the more heat they could absorb and then return. In an oven like this, it was the bricks, not the fire, that baked the bread. My oven looked like a gloppy cube, without even the crudest approximation of the graceful heat reflecting domes that topped the fancier designs, but J. Steve was insistent ugly ovens baked great bread. The crowning touch was the door. A plug of thick wood built from the 2 by 4 cut to measure. The sun had set. Fog was rolling into the yard, cold and dense. The oven was done. I stepped back to appraise it. It looked like a pile of junk. It was a success. I wanted badly to try it out here. J. Steve caution impatience spelled doom. Before I could bake with it, I had to cure the oven by building a very small fire, then growing it larger and larger still, all over the course of several hours. I wanted to badly try it out here. J. Steve cautioned, impatience spelled doom. Before I could bake with it, I had to cure the oven by building a small fire, then growing it larger and larger still, all over the course of several hours, until I had reached peak flammage, about 800 degrees, and in the process coaxed the latent moisture out of the bricks. If I rushed the process and baked the full strength right away, it would crack. It would become even uglier and worse. It would never bake it fully balanced fashion. I pushed a few logs inside, arranged them in a loose triangle, tucked some kindling into place, and lit my first fire. It smoked and fumed. A lick of flame appeared, inspected its nest, proclaimed it satisfactory, and began to crackle. There were four ancient lawn chairs lying in a tangle behind the recycle bin, evidence of long departed residents, with vines growing through their seats. I ripped away the vines, carried one of the chairs to the oven, plopped it down, and sat. I waited. It was cold, maybe 40 degrees. I dashed inside to retrieve a blanket, my jacket, and an additional sweater, and when I returned to the lawn chair, I piled them all on the top of myself. I slithered one hand through the heap of grass and in the heap through the heap to grasp and manipulate my poker. A long straight stick gleamed from the back of the yard, while keeping the skin air interface to a minimum. I had another thought, and with reluctance I dismantled my insulating heap to go back inside and retrieve the Clement Street starter in its screw. Wary of the cold, I wedged it into the lawn chair next to me, then built the heap on top of it. I figured the starter ought to be present from the beginning for the beginning of this important next phase in our work together. On the back of the building, the upper window flickered with the movement of blinds. They snapped up and the window slid open with a sharp squeak. A cornelia shaped silhouette appeared. I heard a curious and the silhouette retreated. A few minutes later, Cornelia emerged around the side of the building. She extricated another lawn chair, dragged it over, and plopped herself down. Be a shame if the management company heard about this, she said. It would be a shame indeed. You could keep your neighbor quiet pretty easy, though. Bribe her. I bet she just wants more of that bread. Did she now? She leaned towards the oven, opened her palms to the heat. Why bake it out here? Does it make a difference? I began to list the virtues of the value oven as I had learned them on the message board, not least of which was its capacity for $200 of raw materials and a few hours of labor, not including these hours of fire watching which were decidedly unlaborious. I had doubled my baking capacity. I could fit 4 loaves inside this oven. 4! And they would come out better. This was a wood fired brick oven, the kind used by Everett Broom and also by the artisan bakers of ancient days. I stopped talking, and we were quiet, watching the fire burn. After a while, Cornelia hoisted herself up with a little grunt, said goodbye, and padded into the building. I saw her silhouette in the window. She waved and disappeared, and the light went out, but the window was still open to the cold night air and the smell of the fire. I fell asleep for how long I wasn't sure. When I woke up, the oven was still going strong. The bricks weren't steaming and crackling anymore. The curing process was well underway. The crock wedged next to me was vibrating with the starter's tremors of growth, even though I hadn't fed it. Was it responding to the warmth? I peeled back a sweater and the blanket and heard its quiet musing leaking out into the night. The air was heavy and cold, and when I looked up, I saw a surprise. The oven's heat rising in a steady plume had bored through the fog and cleared a channel to the sky. I saw stars. I'm going to include the letter from Burek in this. So an email from Burek. So from Bio. You asked what makes the mass. I've been thinking about it, and I've come up with 3 things. First is our food. Most mass would say the culture, the starter, is the crucial thing. And of course, the sourdough. Honestly, it's not my favorite. I like the spicy better. But I think you already know that. Second is our singing. Easy one. Third is our reticence. There are mass neighborhoods in cities all over Europe, but you would never know it because we never have signs or storefronts. You will never ever see our beautiful script on the street. It's a shame. So basically, the one thing about these emails are we don't necessarily get to see the question or like the mail from Lewis. We only get to see the replies from View, and the replies are like this. Like get to know sort of in the reply itself that what the question was that Lewis asked, to which View like is replying. If I don't know if it makes sense to you, but it makes sense. We'll meet in the next chapter. Until then, bye bye.